Mr. Talams kamem sulang algok no kanya taala del mer al tutaw mero shorgi da Brussels ice dere kal malungil tutaw el mora rukul adalo rings o mamgal mamarablay malungil tutaw lorkaw kuda ko kumlamut tel mi kaswes mo da dingel wase el ang payday week et juste mang teme la Brussels ice el al tutaw tegal okay nga el alto tawa madi bom sadra really plalorura el salaga na wamri kalrakal kora travel back and forth dara palurir nganya protector til lururingil na mokmed el ayimrak 5 years ding dakpak introducer til mo introduce themselves and they were about the mura showing this wakal ngutel te ale mutal mal lawang ngil total le korka loreng sakal kester kal audience gider al total dire kal mustal dire kal mo make a shout out or congratulations sa muraro ko ng school understand that last week was the last week of instruction or last week of school so congratulations to all students for a very successful year in school. Martirigal promoting the 8th graders. Congratulations are in order. And I hope you find the right high school sa Ilmoringi. Congratulations and more our seniors. And I hope come ensure gagi the last talwar Kamira high school. And as you're preparing for graduation, I hope and I hope they all come true. And then last but not the least, congratulations al morarul parents al malnemring al lamakta sa angaligi or giser tirabekal tuta o nga meeting na school magigid al bekal to kolorul al support angaligi ul mang sabril graduate al semester year malubin sabril promoter al year and we know it's been a rough year with school going on mga COVID makatakoram mga restrictions but yet katakoram din nila continue level provide the education more ngaligit so congratulations to everyone and I hope you celebrate safely al Maranmel Wirma next week so I guess tagay al tutaw at nga adra call assist lab mawan el staff centergi the L'Oreal volunteer so I would like to take this moment and ask my guests to introduce themselves so I'll start with Dr. James Guest.
Hello, good morning. I'm Dr. James Guest. I'm from the United Kingdom. I work at Newcastle University and I lead the Coral Assist project, which has been doing work in Palau with PICRC since 2017.
Ali Ungil Tutao, my name is Adriana Jimenez and I'm a postdoc research associate at the Coral Assist Lab. I've been enjoying a lot coming to Palau since 2017 to do the research that we're doing on estimating heat tolerance of corals, and we just think that Palau is the right place to do this research, and I hope we can explain about it in the next half an hour.
Malwaysay tiral gasangal al tutaw ngalngia Dr. James Guest ang kanya toktangal kora leader tagi L'Oreal Coral Assist Lab ngima Dr. Adriana Jimenez nga tiral adara tagi the lab from Newcastle University tanga ngara UK tiral nga mlebela sira 2017 Mr. Relil el kora estimate kagidel heat tolerance ra kagidel maranda so ang daling isalta ra shorgi the nobsadra heat tolerance ra maranda wasing mga alkalde la bel sabela maranda lotur ya really kagidel ada mlame o mesagel bek padangela amaran del miliwek karbela we kora omisel wasing ngwanga nga taletele le kora wanga nga just ring isel sugumang mal mo magyal vavabeng ngarangaral kleal dang sa elotukurang kalmaranda. So, good morning, Dr. James Guest and Dr. Adriana. So, before we started our show this morning, kind of explaining what the project is about, but not in depth. So, I would like to ask you, what is the project and what is it about? What kind of motivated you to start this project?
Okay, yeah, thanks for that question. So the idea for this project started in 2016, 2017, and I was looking for some funding to do some interesting research, and the European Union has a really good funding program called Horizon 2020. And I decided to apply for money from them, and the types of projects they fund are really sort of projects that are really ambitious and a little bit risky. But the idea is that if you do risky research, as long as it's feasible and as long as you are confident that you can do the work, often that leads to big leaps in understanding in science. So that really appealed to me. I liked that idea, and I'd been working on corals for quite a long time, and one of the big interests in coral reef science at the moment is to see if we can actually assist corals to survive in the face of climate change, because coral reefs are probably one of the most threatened ecosystems that's most threatened by climate change, and that's because corals are very sensitive to quite small increases in temperature. They live quite close to their sort of temperature tolerance. So the interest is in whether, so people know that the main thing we have to do is deal with the problem of climate change. We need to reduce our carbon emissions, and that's the most critical thing. But that's going to take time, and we've already released a lot into the atmosphere, and that's still there, and that's going to take time to sort of be, for that to sort of go away. So in the meantime, we're wondering, are there other things we can do to help corals to survive? And one of the interests is whether we can actually increase their heat tolerance a little bit. And one of the methods that people have suggested doing that is by finding naturally heat-tolerant corals and then actually breeding them in the same way that we do in agriculture. So, for example, some people are putting a lot of research attention into trying to find varieties of, rice that's more drought tolerant and so on. So it's something a little bit like that. It's a bit unusual because people don't normally do this in wild populations in nature. So we're trying to figure out whether that would actually work. Is it actually possible to do that? Can we find more heat tolerant corals? Can we breed them? Do the offspring, like the offspring reproduce, do they also inherit that from their parents? And then, are there any risks to doing that? So, for example, a more heat-tolerant coral might grow a bit more slowly because it might be putting more of its energy into surviving a heat wave, and it might grow more slowly. So that could be a problem. And then finally, if we're successful in doing that, would we be able to how would we put these out onto a reef? How would we actually get them out onto a reef to boost the heat tolerance of the reef, or even to prepare it for a heat wave? So that was a kind of overview of the project, and we designed a number of experiments that we thought we could do here in Palau to test some of those ideas and see whether this approach is feasible.
Thank you, Dr. Guest. Ngal toktang al-tutaw amlo asala sa tial project al-gotol gor ulmu ngiling mlaringi te alrawdo the mamla sabi iruli proposal ertir el mortegi del modern lo sing Horizon 2020 tiang ako ra funding el opportunity will provide ng European Union EU el gora support the really adal sa dudula waseng support el gora dadu sang risky malubang ambitious research ay gel gora sel suguma ada gora met ada swel gora talgi bil gasa hal gora luto am swel ngitil agora mal kultoy e seguida gora malmle persuader ngi ma ultili tel project le tel project loru ngi masuba marand so ngi abek بدين الأذى المصوبة مرand المصوبة كده الهيت tolerant الcorals so ngi مرand البلاد identify التلقيب السبق له طورة مقياد الذهب مال أوليت تلقى الأذى ما يجيد المرand السبق السربايبر مقياد الذهب مال مي مصوبة أو مثل بس مقرن على مقبول بنجلا جل بيبي مرand المصوبة له ملا موت بتوع مرand الهيت tolerant mang tengkel project tira coral assist ma asig the roller tira wase tamara assist gal coral some sebel survive agigid the effects of climate change including ia a temperature adaba more pa mo makialda esel bal makialda adaba qadam nilo say gal maranda sabel mad malubigid armela maranda amis mong mamadang kal maranda so تجد البروتكتور تيرا والغرا أوريور نقول مقصير نيرا وما مقرو لابراس وسنغالي أدرا بيبي رابلول يقول لهم مقرو لابراس نمرين أدرا وتمال كلوا كانسوجي ملوبن إنسو إن واسين غانية يجي ذا لمسوب الغكيل الأبراس ولا سين مغرا ضرورا قال لسوب ربيع لتشين قال براس من سبعين قال براس المال ملدي هذه أم إلا براس ابن دو إن دخل كلوا رالم أو إن دخل كلوا أول المي سو سيجي ذا الغرا كانسات ملوبن أيفيا الغقن جلو المي أو مسرين رامراند واسي مغرا غادون كايجي ذا الهيت tolerant coral غدا نمو بدين السنغان غرا مرand غارينيا بير أمسوي بالغرب لا الملا أسر سنغرا قليل يتمو أمسك جدا مران ذي قولي مالني أمغرو لترى لمقبول وبنجلا بير مران دلوقتي المغران مسبق لنقال هيت tolerant coral وبنجلا ترى مران ذي أميل إسل توب ذنجل بس نقال مران دنج سبق لنجي جدا نقال مران دل ما يجي جدا التريدز ملوبن موان جي جدا المران دلول السبق الريسيسترا كلول كلول دلال عذاب so tell in research tira mal interesting and if other gora mle proposal ngin beranga gora mot eligible wase otil agora mal ambitious and that's other ear but they've proved us wrong and like they're doing the work so no dream is too big they can they're doing it now so it is possible and this is really interesting. This is my first time really hearing about your project, so this is all new information to me. So you mentioned that you came to Palau in 2017, so it's been 5 years since this project. So earlier before the show we kind of talked with Sadoy and he asked you guys like why did you choose Palau, why Palau? So I would like to ask that question again so that our listeners can kind of know like what was your motive or kind of intentions of why you chose Palau and how has it been so far?
Yeah, thank you. So I think the main reason why when James wrote the proposal to choose Palau was mainly because of the Palau International Coral Reef Center was here, and James already had some collaborations with them, with the CEO, and basically we know our knowledge is about the ecology and the biology of the corals, but we don't know the sites and the reefs in here. So having a center in Palau that does research and that is mostly formed by local people was a real motivator to come and choose Palau, because you are related to your ecosystem and you have been always related to your ecosystem and you know how it works. You know where to find the species that we need to work with, and that can change a lot of the time that we need to spend on trying to figure out how to do an experiment. So by having this great collaboration, we can already move to the next step and start the research. And I think that was one of the main big motivators. The other thing that was really important was that around the world, coral reefs have been facing the impacts of climate change due to the increase of the water sea temperature. which has produced massive bleaching events and mortalities. And Palau got hit by one of these massive bleaching events in 1998, but since then there haven't been any other of these massive deaths in Palau, which means that there's a lot of really good reefs with high coral cover and diversity in here, where we can actually work really well and find a lot of biodiversity and different types of reef ecosystems. So that was a really plus to select Palau as well. So those two things were really important for us to come to Palau.
Thank you, Adriana. So, ngayon toktang Dr. Adriana Jimenez lo explain na say tamlecho serbela leng sel mlangal nga tuluol. Sel kota was sel partnership with Tilo Bangala Center gidra PICRC. Dr. James Kesta mlangal nga trip ringin mera before sige dong ni establish ra connection na ringin ma CEO. Basta gidra Balurtal project to ko almost serbela was the Barbela wing sa Edelos Pera PICRC el Brutal Project Center of Research ang aring equipment sa abutel kora bebil dongul sa Ilos Pe Almet ang center Emrulia Center sa accommodator tier dire kaltang to sa center ang aring other bela lorior ngi el aring aklom dang tier dol ama angi kalma maranda al tirigal naman makatoktor center matakam dingel site sa se ngari kaya ngari kaya gidel hit tolerant coral ngi mangari kaya asa edel kora reference site gidel kora information el gidel local amba ngi as ako sa gidel ko kora wasing sedel provide sige ko expertise and more and then other advisor to kasi mangaral site sa edel Marula research kora Mrula gagid lomasub and then nang say gida wal partnership al blal start ring 11:30 gagid al adman sabi el manul no sabi el mebela leto tol mesra center gid la sing sabi el provider say el ngora sugal diregal malmo or emphasize say gid lang ngora wal el sabi el send missionary gid missionary center la say to be a center of excellence el produce a high quality and impactful research education opportunities and support the stewardship ra marato ko ra tabel belao so say gid agora awan nagigid el tokoy el gola dili el gola mo subira missionary gid ang sabi el gola scientific research institution el provide ay gid el services el mortal gid el guest researchers and then through that they established a collaboration dobante es el oral and they've provided like a whole new set of information el direct merigid direct el improve understanding el gid the belbelao ma direct provide assets el mora kukto ka science education in Marang School. Esel ang yerong el gora ul matam le chusen me bela wasay chal bela am laringi sel klo el to say massive bleaching el laringi sel ragara 1998 sel da bleaching in sel level kora mo ba elelo maranda lang mal mo makial marmel maranda amis mang maringa to sa coral bleaching was say ever since I say gidel time min el anging dila ka kora mal maklowal event el mo I say ya igal maranda rigida kora mal lungil maral kora mal lungil la healther ngi mang dili ka no sorry el may ko o misala sa ngara ul material the best ako mal lungil ko healthy el in the way ngora tuaseng ngora mal pristine tal ngora autotite gid el idea pristine paradise palalay even though ang namoringi ay kagit el maklo el kaldala la tabel tub en ngora di sabi el recovery kal marande ko den continue edile kal sayang wase abela wa malungil la kora structure ngi leng wase nga alba abe ko den kadikere maalamol mang dire kal nga te el bro la gid el researcher tira kal kakaros el ecosystem el ngaringi song el bek paving la reef like patch reef ma al ubay gid el kora alamol ma kukora di kula alba ma أجل بيبينا إيكو سيستم السبائث المسس اللي الطابق الغراء المرة كير إن دي رجال غراء provide ako ra brothel research and mortirments ila masa kasi kalmaran ng ngungil cases sa mga artegi da loko system or sa mga martegi da system yung kala mga natalitelen so gagi ako ram letul aluul mata ko ram na solid merbelaw melak ko ra di mo gertil wasing kung koram lang mo 5 years sa lorutang kung koram nga niya the elaborals at the lomes or kung koram nga niya interesting albet batik alsal tagi del 5 years egal research gila de los pa ako mga del time o masa pattern nila sa nga niya ko ra sa edel mesa ngal ko ra isang constant or continuous el pattern nila mesa nila gigi de lom subed and then yung mo subed a lot of it was in ara kora get kara level ra during ni kana umregal ay marak makmo agerti and thing kora daksal madangeta tela level at tang sabi mo maski da hin safety was in kora nga result 30 or ang dag and then sa edel group mo invite 30 or da mo mangisal kora official el babeling el bolot of it. So I was just explaining to them that you guys have been doing the project for 5 years and for scientific research or just any research in general we kind of need like a long period of time to kind of see the trends in order for us to see the results of our work and it kind of leads to my next question say asking are there any results of this project that we can see right now or if not has there been an interesting information or something that you found over the course of 5 years that you would want to share with us this morning?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. Yeah, I completely agree. You need long-term research to really get at understanding ecosystems. So, yeah, there's been some really interesting findings. So one of the first things that we wanted to do is when we were looking for variation in heat tolerance, we wanted to see how much difference is there between the sort of most tolerant corals and the least tolerant corals. And so, you know, when you go to a reef, all the corals from one species kind of look the same, but just like any organism, like people, you know, there's lots of variation, and some are more susceptible and some are less susceptible and so on. But when you go to one reef and find the one species, there's no real way of telling if you just look at a coral to know whether it's more tolerant or not. So what we had to do is go and sort of test to see how different they were. And one of the problems with that is that when you get a bleaching event, a heat wave that causes bleaching, this is quite a long temperature stress, so it can last for weeks and weeks, the marine heat waves. And we needed to kind of figure out how to make that happen in the lab. And that's quite logistically difficult because to set up aquarium tanks and to keep corals sort of in conditions where they're really healthy in the tanks, and then to sort of emulate a natural heat wave using heaters and lights and so on is technically quite challenging, but Adriana and the rest of the team have sort of figured out a really nice way of doing that, and it's got a little bit better each year, the system, and now we have a really, really nice system to do that. And then what we had to do is figure out how to kind of score the corals, so we decide which, you know, how do we sort of like tell which one's the most tolerant and least tolerant. So we've come up with ways of kind of giving them a kind of a score, like a heat tolerance score, based on how well they survive through one of these experiments. And what we found is actually really surprisingly, even corals on the same reef that are next to each other and are the same species, you can get really, really big differences in between the most and the least tolerant. And the way we measure that is a thing called a degree heating week. So it's a sort of it's like a measure of the amount of temperature stress that they can take until they start bleaching and dying. And what we found is that between the most and the least tolerant, there's about 4 or 5 degree heating weeks. So that means, you know, it can tolerate, you know, the most tolerant coral can tolerate quite a bit more heat stress than the least tolerant. And we've sort of tried to figure out, like, what does that mean in terms of how much longer they could survive for before they start getting really severe bleaching regularly. And we think that that might give them about another 17 years in terms of, like, when we look at the different climate emission scenarios, that if we manage to achieve sort of the more ambitious climate scenarios, then the most tolerant corals might have about another 17 years compared to the least tolerant corals. Which it doesn't sound like very much. That's not a lot, but that might give enough time for, if we're putting in these ambitious emissions programs to reduce emissions, that might be enough time. So that's sort of quite an important finding, I think, and we're trying to publish that particular finding at the moment. And then the second sort of really interesting thing, and we're getting those results actually now, really in the last few weeks, is to see if the offspring that we bred, whether they take on some of the heat tolerance of their parents. And we found really good evidence for that they do at different stages. And of course, it's not every offspring. It's not like 100% heritable, but we're definitely finding evidence of heritability. So we still have to work out what that means for if you were trying to do selective breeding, because it would mean that the offspring are on average a bit more tolerant, but there's still a lot of variability. So it's like still figuring out, well, how would you pick parents for these programs? How would you pick the best sort of coral parents to do this? How many would you use? And would you be, would there be other risks like creating like genetic sort of bottlenecks, like reducing the amount of genetic diversity? So there's still a lot to figure out. And then the final thing is, working out about how we actually outplant corals to the reef if we want to do restoration. And when we first did that, we found one of the problems, if you put out very small corals, and actually lots of people said this to us, and particularly in Palau, they said, oh, if you put out those baby corals, they'll be eaten by fish. And sure enough, when we put them out, they got eaten by fish. So we thought, okay, how do we improve that situation? So if we want to outplant them, we get more to survive. And with one PhD student who was here, Evelina, she actually stayed here for the whole over the pandemic. And she did experiments to design special sort of substrates that we could settle baby corals onto, and they have a particular shape that sort of protects the baby corals from being eaten. And we found if we did that, then we can really increase the number that are surviving, so that they get much, much higher survivorship. So we're sort of still developing that technique and want to, hopefully that's something that managers and conservation organizations or anybody who's interested in doing reef restoration could use that technique. So there's been some really good findings. There's lots more to discover when we get back and look at the results, but so far it's been really interesting. And this trip particularly, it's been so great coming back, because we couldn't come back for 2 years over the pandemic, and it gave us, we really missed being here, but it gave us a lot of time to think and look at our data. And then now we've come back. This has been a really successful trip because we've had a lot of time to decide and plan exactly what we wanted to do, and so it's been really great.
That's good to hear. Mangkal toktanga ako ramlo ko ay sa laseng warawang nga tele la really mangwaseng way gagid dolgo la say kal research tos pe ang mga time lo mas gagid el partner na mong edal ko understand da waseng warawang nga result tra wala mangko lang nga tril to ko lulsad waseng no sabe el ko identify sel el difference malubing sel ko ka ringel el qot el qora wa sa seng CC el maran del most heat tolerant من قال least heat tolerant so قال غطى المسيسي المران دل سأله تقول قلد للعظام من قال الغطى المئة وتنو نص إيمة تجر سيجيد القرا أول الديفرنسر سيجيد التلقى غوستوري وس التلقى سلورو رايكان غارني تانغ غارا أكواريوم أو غارا سنتر التوسبي قرا تمبر كله dongul gora wal help el change temperature da bul gora wal المواتلة اللي سلسقوا مع طبعا ما مقيال so ترى رمولا جاكيد التانغ قرا state heat stress المورا جاكيد التانغ يقولين تمسكور جاكيد القرال سلا سينغرا رجال المراندا السرفايف وانغرا كم غتيت كبسي تملم تيجل وسنجل غتل مسيسي المراندا ذو وسن تلاقيه بالسبب السرفايفر 4 or 5 degrees higher than the least heat tolerant coral. So let's say nga marand marand Leah masisi marand ding sabi survive up to let's say 35 degrees Celsius ralm langot MCC ego nga sabi survive up until 30 degrees Celsius. Sige dawal ko na losa dan ngin gagit tokta nga say mengel ko MCC marand dawal MCC ringel ko ito marand by 4 to 5 degrees Celsius. إذا قال قرا منصب المرولة جيد الرالي قرا ما identify واسي السوق متل قدري مال من قرا في أمسرا pattern climate change ما ذا بلا ذا بعد ما المغيال إن قرا وانا كلام قتلا تام الجيد الغطم سي المران ده سبب السرفايف إن له مسكذا سيعقسني لأسبب المسكذا 17 years السبب اللي نجل قط المسيسي المراندا الكير عذاب and after 17 years ما نمو مغير عذاب من جل مراندا نمو ذاك السبب اللي تقول أقل ذل العذاب so يجي ذا يجي الغرا ذي بيبرا أغرا findings through this study تقول أنا متير نجي ذا لسه تدير غترا المو publish يجي ذا findings so سلتو بس يجي ذا official publication تدير إن نسأل المؤمسر سيجي ذا البابية ديري قال منو أيسر لسيجا السيجد لو أيسر تيجد الغرا أولى ريلير يوم لمسا ذا لسيتو مقبو أمران ما وانا ريسال ترتيرا واسي ملصو بإيل المتيغا أمران ذا اللو المقبو رنجل هيت تولرانت ما ذي مران ذا التملو مقبو يوم لمسو بإيل المتيغا مغلقل أمران ذا النيلا يجد التريتس را the parent corals الهيمو heat tolerant دين واسين أي رغول بالتست الcorals of course عندنا غني 100% غني رغويا نيلا يا traits را يجي the heat tolerant corals من غني يا أبيبي لرني النيلا ما أبيبي لرني روكملو تقصب أي ماي من متدير غمبوت المؤمن سوبر سيجد لسه ملأسون تمر لك كده selective breathing yang bakal bolorungi يقول وانا تلتلا لا process البل select كده المرند المو breathe ما أقول من سأل إنجل نقول لك المرند المو سيجد التريت را كده القرالس القرا والو المائل and then dili ko na explain one ako kurali lurungil was tamil garange ako ra omsubel coral out plant mang wasing makaradolal mamrandra karike mang sila lokot tal murungi at labam kikalin marandal nanging researcher til Evelyn van der Steek gaya miro la coral out plant so we did a PR on her and the Maki I think they did like a training and they did the coral out plant with the Cotter State Rangers at Ngirong Island. And so say the activity lururingi gaya the toktang Evelyn namlo osabel was makarang al dalmi amranding the المتمال يعني because you were saying that whenever they did the small corals they would get eaten by the fish so sila lola maigin gigrin ngalgil amran drakot teng angi la lo mang malubang ngaling ako rapipil at ko yung lo ul maigil maran dako dim la kalungil mal Bukurou mang kayi del toktang amlam subula sing makarang adolal mamran de wanga nakatalengil orang wanga naklungil maran da dalmi yung sabiel mal moklo el dia agora wa ngigil malubang baby ra armal mo o mga nang kalmaran de ko ding matmalang nga rin yung armal mga maranda so with that project ang nasabi il disa nila say wangaral shape wangaral tatelamran or wangara klungel hngi ko ding sabi il dalmi and kalbol disturbed and then ang nasabi il lagi del project til la gigi del tutulas ang lagi lamran ma gigi del real Evelyn van der Steeg am langia time yung no sa Iloilo Elementary at Ragoro State tamlo dual mabebira marandra pitarang erong sa diragal mle affecta ringia one regel typhoon na ringira nakal within 2012 or 2013 it's either typhoon Bofa or Haiyan el tilmalisel telgibra refrang erong ang kay Evelyn namlo sa Iloilo ngima wana aquarius tergidra aquarium maki mreb etamlo sa il tob del moranger ang Elementary at Ragoro State tamil subal malal magigid malgalam random. So I was just explaining to them how Evelyn did the coral outplanting project and how she kind of identified the shapes and the some of the stuff that they needed to know before outplanting corals.
So one thing that I wanted to add and is just to highlight one of the benefits of working in Palau and working with the center was like Evelyn, one of our PhD students, as James mentioned, she arrived to Palau in 2020, a week before the pandemic started, and then she decided to stay here just because we were counting with the support of the center for her to continue here without us because we were coming just a week after the pandemic started, and she decided to stay, and at that time was when we were able also to include Leah in our team to have her support 2 days a week. So that was a great achievement for us. Like without that we wouldn't be able to have continue our project and we wouldn't be here today. So Evelina and Leah did a great job on maintaining all our nurseries in the reef and also continuing the work. So I think Leah did a lot of work in helping Evelina to outplant all the coral babies to the reef, and yeah, that like without the center we wouldn't have been able to be here today.
Thank you. So angkal Adriana amlo explain na se naringigil PhD student tertiary nila Evelyn van der Steeg kagidel lugol-lugol nila sing milal magigil magalam rand hanggang amler bela 2020 1 week before I'll start the pandemic tiragang amlegil mera wal week after. And magme yung close supporters bang decide al kerpelawe or your continue a project and mga isa la sa tamal mlot me warang gil wasing sabihin malman mar project la support la center build provide more Evelyn ang nga research assistant salwa Leah el 2 days a week en oryo laboratory maintain nagigid nursery till bilagigid mga lamrande ora malmal martagid the relay ul magsabihin continue the project even through the pandemic, although most of them were not able to be here for the duration of the pandemic in 2020 and most part of 2021. You guys were still able to do the project. So this is a kind of good transition into Leah's role into this project. So malungit to taw Leah. So before ato ko natin mo and siya gigil ko tayo question na kadi mo introduce yourself. Mo introduce ka we ko sa say like ungora wangan ko ramla wangan na experience sa Loyola Elementary e ko nga gigil ko really un morul alsala let's say it's within the week nga ko really un morul salam assist Evelyn for the project.
Okay, so lang. So nga ang Leah Bukurou nga ka research assistant ra PICRC. Tiragang seral start at na ask ra PICRC al provide one research assistant al sister tira gal really. Then before they got here, I was with Evelyn first for the like a month and 2 months. So we were prepping before they got here. So like aqual helper till for their experiments, I helped prep the setup, and like it's just like my work as the PICRC researcher, PICRC research assistant. Like whatever they need assistance in. So we do field work. Just yesterday we were in the field. We do office work. Like they have me analyze some pictures sometimes or enter data. Also lab work. I help them sometimes with DNA extraction. It's really fun work. I really enjoy working with them. I'm learning a lot. So I'm glad that I had this opportunity to work with them 2 days a week.
So lang Leah. So Leah research assistant. Leah plan highlight taringi rawan na show ra maybe a few shows back. And then Leah did kalmle graduate therapy sila ba AS ringi ra environmental marine science and she's had a lot of experience sa doctoral research in nga step up program. Hada nga Dr. Chris Kitalong dili kalmle nga experience ringi mo ra REU or research experience for underrepresented people. Undergrads. Sorry. Mang naringat alala ko more Hawaii dili kan mo research ringi ang Warrior Center research assistant and then ang igagid partnership malubong collaboration laban tayo researchers adiri kal provide ako ra sa capacity building malubong ko ra opportunity to expand the expertise ra our staff ra center el kuk masuba baby ra tokoy el tiragid el adra agig del baby ra bulu el kuk ng expertise tira may provide so not only wal medilo subel lola information del mo benefit tier but like I said sa Laura like information nilul sig adira kal mal valuable merkid may dira kal ko training ma o si sa aklo rura field mga rang adira kal sa benefit ra waliya ma researchers sa center altang kuk sa health pergid la say ngora nga teletel nga pa sel teletal sa de los peringin mo la vele altang korang sugi da telkibel mobiota vele malubang ngosugi dal sa dal maya research sa gidal accurate malubang mareta so gagida yel gora baby ra to el cook nga ka omisringi through this partnership and collaboration with Newcastle University specifically the Coral Assist Lab. There's been a lot of capacity building so I was explaining to them like not only you guys to come and kind of have learn like about the corals and the reef and have all this information just for yourself but in a way you're kind of contributing to us so we can expand our knowledge on our ocean resources and not only that but you also add like valuable information to our science database or science curriculum for school kids and also through this collaboration we're also like capacity building wise like you guys are training Leah and you're having all these meetings and like field works that you're doing with her and then maybe along the way we learn something from you guys and it could also help us from our end and really improve our methods and ways of research and education. So it looks like we're hitting close to 8:50, so we can go ahead and start closing the show. So if you guys have any last things you want to say or give a shout out to your team while we're here. Evelyn, if you're watching this through YouTube, hi. Thank you for all your hard work. Even through the pandemic, you chose to stay back and hold down the fort for the team. Thank you. And if you were here, you were probably here on the show with us. So if there are no last minute or last things to add on, then we'll go ahead and close the show.
Yeah, just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity. It's great to be able to talk about our work. And just sort of really on your last point, that's one of the most important things to us and always has been whenever I've done research because when you come from England and you work on coral reefs, you always have to go somewhere else. And it's not just about going somewhere and doing the research and the science. It's about working with communities and local researchers and really trying to learn about trying to do something that's sort of beneficial to the country that you're in and trying to integrate and try to build capacity. I think that's as important as the research and for us that's one of the most critical things. And as we sort of go forward and we want to obviously this project will finish this year, but we hope to get more research funding. We'd really like to build that collaboration further and continue with that. So we're really grateful to have had that opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I just wanted to highlight that all the research that we're doing is just to prove concepts. At the moment, we are not restoring any areas or producing in big masses heat-tolerant corals. We're just understanding how can we do this? Is it feasible? How is the heat tolerance transmitted to the next generation? What's the percentage that is transmitted? And is this an option to manage reefs in the future? Or we better just not do that and focus our funding on something else that will be more productive? So we're just testing ideas and to find out what will be the best. And ideally, and what we have learned from the pandemic as well, is that we really need to work together close with the local communities. We will get much better results with the funding that we get if the local community is the one who has hands-on and is able to produce the data, especially when we are so far away in England. And we learn it from the pandemic, having the collaboration with PICRC. It's just as critical as being able to do the research. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Guest and Dr. Humanes. Takatakta nga koratim le orang asaw le wase eng malt no warang lil mranyate lil el sabail el mruta lurio e partner lo bagela sentergi le ta dirigal lombra lo hace ya research aklo tutela landing dirigal sorry sel gora dula set no se va gagi del no se other lawyer center mar other belao el gora mal involve community el mora researcher tiling yang wal clock lev sorry sel nga involvement tagi then not only that nga mongi la result sa langay tatiri los pergi del el murlay gay yang kagi del Dr. Adriana mlo o gora di mga tagtilo set la ruringi aval lorula gora PS el ruldas malubata plan del mamrula o magrula bato al maran del mo omela kagi del hit tolerant corals de loringi agora di o mese kagi del kagi de lo hacen IVRT malubong proposal RT togora di boil blood testing and sa losa deringi ngora tele la sab el to el magat mokla ding diagal ngaringi agora intention RT ra mamruringi lo hace mamruringi mokla to yo mo omela to al maran de ma way kaki son togora di mirror tagi del project to la mesela say sabihin el may kagi del results el gora bel hope el momay and yes they're kind of takagi del gora sabihin lo mes maul matagora excited el mruringi ding tadir ko open el mamsub el gidel wasing so manguk ngaringa bebirat atele el amsub el edel yakni momay galo sisulam result el amsub el dagal salming la aral en sabi ako cospa kay linggo tagi del project wal gora bla maestría te el nivel sabi el masuba atele la omakpo amran de ma omarol amran del sabi el lotogura kaldele la tabam son kada kora dim da elgung 5 minutes and mo 9 makmo okora start el closer a show gid so man sulang al mle orange ra produce la isel al tutao the IMR yang ko am not eligible mayo dara el al total start and then get yal kora dim malmle ngila show gid etegal toktang la bangral al tutao malia malding na center la pekel sils masu mga nga karmiu malubang somiu ko kadi mo denge ko mal suba del mera center stapa somil gora oger mo da dortin sabi el arrange ra time mo ko ra adu muto ko mo ka denge ko ka to tele la subir malubang so ilio dang one center 488-6950 SL Askara Leah maluba Dr. James Guest maluba Dr. Adriana Humanes tegagi guest rangal al tutao daka ngot al mesela nyo sir nga kondikti o ay sira balula say na open na pala aquarium we still have our promo 50% off so So maka-adult adarang dal blue in $10 $50% off mandi mo $5. Locals $5 something 50% off mandi mo $2.50. Yarang al school aditada marang al ngayon 5. Dili aditada masumang sab ami weme ngani ako rabe el display ramam ra aquarium. Ngani art exhibitions ma video ra tipsy underwater camera sa adal may ako mamisay give maluwad ko kadi kaso samda ding summer mang komora o sige activity nga ligiwe mira aquarium daka ko rangot al miscellaneous ti na obes ngani gigit last show na ay sa Berius ice t-shirt ngani abes el Berius ice t-shirt so you Roma Dimira Center give shabe marabiliu ang kola di mlay gigi kola tekangot al bogulgoy makti mo mutan mo ay sa gigi el sao lama tanga kalmlamdung wal martikal toktang maramil kester git akmil Adian sa kamil at tutaw. Thank you for tuning in and then we'll see you guys on the next show May 31 sige dia last the show gidra May and then last shout out again for your promoting 8th graders and graduating seniors. Congratulations and also to all PCC graduates congratulations Madiligal Murarang Algarbelaw Ngal Selbelaw Michael Belaw Ngila School Year. Congratulations Belaw mal proud of you. Thank you and then we'll see you on the next show.